So,
here we are at Bog Paper Towers.
yeah, here we are at Bog Paper Towers. I feel at the moment like I'm living a dual existence. I mean, I've just come from the old world. I've just been recording a program for Woman's Hour, Radio 4 Woman's Hour, about housework and about whether men pull their weight and whether they should do more.
What did you conclude?
I concluded that women, unfortunately, bless them, are designed for doing housework in a way that men just aren't.
Physically or mentally?
Mentally, really. The line, which of course infuriated the presenter Jane Garvey, was that there is never going to be a prayer that men will do what women want them to do, and i.e. to pull their weight in the field of household chores, simply because they can't be bothered.
Well,
they
don't
don't
think
care.
You care enough.
They don't see dirt.
You have a sort of dust blindness.
It's absolutely true. I know that my house would look like a complete shithole if I didn't have a wife, and it's not because I don't care about the idea of beautiful things and a nicely designed home, and I do like a clean room. It's just that my tolerance threshold is so much higher than any. And
you don't care enough to do something about it to prevent it getting that bad.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is why, if you love your wife so much, you don't tidy up and clean to help her.
It's not that the intentions, the good intentions aren't there. It's just that when it comes down to it, I've got other shit to do. I mean, here I am recording a podcast for Bog Paper, which I see as much more of in my skill set.
Okay, right.
Sort of talking bollocks on.
Is much more beneficial than it.
Talking bollocks, and at the same time raising serious questions about issues like gold.
This
and the
is
economy.
for the greater good.
Yeah,
You look at it from a utilitarian point of view.
But what I meant by that this dual universe I inhabit. I mean, I really do feel like I've got this sort of red pill, blue pill scenario in my life where half the time I'm going on as if la-di-da-di-da, things are nothing's changed, and then of course I go into the world of gold buggery, and zero hedge, and I suddenly realise that we are living a fantasy.
All is not well.
Yeah. I mean, let me. Zero hedge. I do find so depressing that I almost would be much happier not reading it.
Well, you once challenged me to not read Zero Hedge for a whole day, and you said, how will you feel at the end of the day? And I had a lovely afternoon.
You do.
Yeah.
There is no question that if you want a recipe for happiness, don't read Zero Hedge, and don't read any of those. Any Austrian economics
anywhere that
website.
tells you the truth.
You don't want the truth. Is it the blue pill or the red pill? I forget. But whichever one it is, you don't want to take it.
Is this from that film?
From The Matrix.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Only a girl would not know what the blue pill.
Actually, I thought it was another film with the Samuel L. Jackson, but maybe I'm thinking of something else. Pills.
So, and I see this not just on Woman's Hour, I have to say, but tragically, when I read the papers about the latest government announcements, today, for example, there was a story on the front page of the Telegraph saying that the government is going to ensure that everyone pays the price for flooding, for the costs of flooding.
Okay.
That our insurance bills will go up commensurately to protect those people who've bought houses by a river. Well, my question there would be why? What if you're stupid enough to buy a house on a floodplain, or stupid enough to build a development on a floodplain, you should be penalised for that. I mean, I would presume that as is the way of markets, that if you buy a house by a river liable to flooding, then the flood risk is in the price you paid for the house.
You'd assume so, yeah.
It would make absolute sense, wouldn't it? And also, you would inquire. You would say to the people, is flooding a problem in this house? You know, you're looking at the river sort of 2 inches away.
From the door.
And they would say, well, I can't tell a lie.
Yeah.
You know, we do have to take our furniture upstairs once a year or more, and yes, it is a problem, but you learn to live with it, or whatever. And at that point, you make the decision: do I or do I not buy this house? Same with insurance. I would have thought that the way the insurance market works, I mean, it's about risk and premium. This is what
I'd assume, that the insurance companies check that whether or not you're in a floodplain, do they not?
Well, they surely do, and surely the risk is reflected in the premium, so that, you know. So I don't really see that it is the government's job to. This is socialisation, isn't it? Yeah. Socialisation of risk. It's what we're seeing happening to the banks. It's what we're seeing happening to people who live by rivers. It's what we're seeing happening to old people in care homes. When the government sets a cap on the amount of money people have to repay for their care when they're elderly, suddenly they're socialising
the costs of that.
The costs. Now, I can see why, from the point of view of a minister who is desperate to court votes and stuff, and particularly a government is.
It's just based on the popularity of.
I can see why it would make sense to make these eye-catching initiative announcements, but for the poor bloody taxpayer and for the poor bloody economy, it's a very different matter. And this is what I meant by this parallel universe. That on the one hand, we've got the unreal world where the government thinks it can keep on giving handouts,
but even worse, the people think
the people keep thinking that worse, I'm sure that all the Woman's Hour listeners believe that the government's job, because they're good BBC people, the government's job is to wipe our bottoms, to make everything nice, from cradle to grave. That is government's job, and if it doesn't, you ask the question, why isn't government doing more? And then in the other world, the global economy is probably in its worst state, I'd say, ever.
I would agree with that.
I don't think there's ever been a time in history where it has been this bad.
On this scale, certainly.
On this scale, yeah. I mean, you can look back at Spain in the 16th and 17th century when they had massive inflation due to their gold that they found in the New World. You can look at the tulip bubble in Holland, but what you don't get, I don't think, in any stage in history is a stage where so many countries have got this massive.
I think this is definitely the most far-reaching crisis that's going on, and even those that we think are safe, when you dig through the numbers, they're not looking superb. No,
they're not. And coming back to the depressing but true zero hedge, they did a report last year. What was the?
Well, they sort of summarised the Boston Consulting Group.
Group.
I think the report was entitled what was it called? On the Road. It was the one after kicking the can down the road. It was called. I can't quite remember the name of this report, but it was end of September. Yeah.
But anyway, what this report said is that in order to deal with the debt overhang. The debt overhang is not going to go away until the middle and upper classes have taken an asset haircut of between 25 and 30%.
Yeah.
So whatever assets you've got and I've got, we can expect to lose 30% to the government before all this is over.
Yeah.
Now, you know and I know that nothing is ever that simple. That the government is going to choose the path of least resistance. So it's going to come after those people who are least mobile and least agile. Which probably means the middle classes rather than the.
I think they're definitely, whatever happened, whatever decisions made, they're just the most screwed over.
International capital is not I mean, the people who are mobile, who can flee to Switzerland, they're not going to get gold.
No, the ones with the planes will be fine.
They pay people to make sure that they don't get gold. But the rest of us, it's a question of where do you hide? Where do you keep your? Where do you put your money? Well, I mean, I reckon the term that we're going to be, a phrase we're going to be hearing a lot more of in the next few years is capital preservation.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah.
I mean, I've got a friend who runs this company called Edelweiss, which specialises in capital preservation. And it's run on the Austrian lines.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's based more surely on the return of your money rather than the return on your money, which is how we've gotten into this mess. People are so concerned about how much money they're making on their capital that actually now we need to be worrying about, are you going to get your capital
when
back?
you've got pretty much zero interest rates, and when you've got the value of money being inflated away through quantitative easing, how do you keep your money from having its value stolen from it? And obviously gold is one answer, perhaps the answer. But that was the other thing that's been disturbing me recently. These stories I've been reading, which I'm sure are quite true, about the way that the gold price is just as manipulated as the LIBOR.
Yeah, well, I think rate. If we were to think that, we hear about LIBOR and, interest rates manipulated and the cash supply is manipulated, we would be naive to think that things like gold and silver weren't manipulated. Silver, there's certainly a huge amount of evidence that it's manipulated.
Well, I mean, I didn't realise until I read your interesting article, Jan, that about the London gold pool.
In the 1960s and 70s.
So yeah, 61 to 68.
Yeah.
And you write, in November of 1961, 8 central banks met to agree a system by which, through cooperation, the Bretton Woods arrangement could be maintained and the gold price could be managed and suppressed at or below £35.20. God.
I know. What a bargain.
What is it now?
This is 1568. Well, 1,568.
If only we'd bought in 1968. How would that have compared with the stock market over that?
I can't comment on that.
No.
I'm afraid, no.
So this says the gold pool was designed to dump gold on the gold market whenever it began to rise. And you say this was a blatant and open attempt to rig the gold market, and of course this goes on. But you came up with a marvellous phrase. Even though.
If everything is manipulated, including gold, then gold is the best looking horse in the glue factory. And I can't take credit for that phrase. That's Ned Naylor Leyland.
Ned Naylor Leyland. Well, I really like that. The best looking horse in the glue factory. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I was heartened and at the same time disconcerted to read a report by, I don't know how you pronounce his name.
It's Ronald Stoerfele, I would pronounce it, but I don't know. My German's not very good. Stoerferle.
Okay, well, we'll call him Ronald Stoerfele. And what was the company he works for?
Erste Group, and the report is called In Gold We Trust, and this is the second report. He released one this time last year.
I think it'd be Erste Group, because it'd be first.
Sorry. Right, Erste Group. There you go. Then.
Probably Erste Gruppe.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, what Ronald was saying was that all this talk of gold being a bubble is not borne out by the fundamentals, which are that money printing is still going on. That the reason that gold is not doing much at the moment has rather more to do with market manipulation than it does with
and also the sort of the strength in currencies that's going the different variations in currencies. You're sort of seeing different movements into the pound because people think it's a safe haven,
right?
So, and gold isn't, a lot of people would say, but you always say that gold's a hedge against inflation. Inflation's rising, so why is gold not going up? But we're actually seeing the reaction to the markets is quite interesting. That whenever there's an announcement made, the sort of the strength in the market is actually not lasting quite as long, and people are returning to gold sooner.
Right.
But it's just we're experiencing what's called a great correction at the moment in the gold price.
Right. Well, anyway, our friend Ronald reckons that gold is going to hit 2,000 by the end of the year.
And he's not alone in that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, who was it who placed the bet that gold would hit 2,000 before it hits 1,000?
I think I'll put it up on the blog. I can't remember his name, I'm afraid, but I'll write it down after this. It'll come to me in a second.
And long term, he thinks it could go as high as, I think 6,000.
Ronnie does.
Yeah. 6,300 or something. I think, which would be very nice for those of us who have
already own gold. Yeah.
Gold, even if it's only modest.
Particularly those who bought it in the 60s. It would be very nice
at that £35.20, that would be really good. I didn't buy at that price. I was only just born then, so yeah. And you weren't even a It
wasn't even a twinkle.
You weren't even a twinkle. No. So clearly, we should buy gold, shouldn't we? I mean, obviously you want to say that, Jan, because you work for a gold company, but it just seems to me an absolute no-brainer.
I think it's a no-brainer, but I think it's very difficult because when you're talking to people that just have their savings in a NatWest savings account, obviously, or any other sort of high street bank, it's quite a difficult step for them to take that they're investing it in something physical, that they can't kind of cash in on or just go and have access to, or it's not an ISA. You're asking them to not only just not to stop trusting the banks, which of course we all talk about every day that we don't trust them anymore, but you're also asking them in a lot of ways to stop trusting the government, because it's the government and the central banks that are devaluing this of your money. And I understand that that's what's happening, but I think it's quite a big mental step for people to take that thing. And also investment in gold, owning gold, does sound still completely survivalist and quite extreme, but there's nothing, it's no harder, it's actually easier in many ways to sort of invest in gold and things than it is in physical gold, particularly the way that we offer it, than it is to buy ETFs or
obviously it's clear that what is it that the ETFs are clearly a con trick. It's like fractional reserve banking, isn't it, for using gold as a...
I think if you're buying gold for long-term investment, you could argue it as that. If it's for the short term, then you can see it. It's to sort of make a quick buck or two, then you can see that. But we're not talking about gold to make you lots of money. We're talking about gold to protect your, like you say, for capital preservation. Yeah. And so yes, I would agree.
Well, capital preservation until such time as the government seeks to confiscate it, like FDR did with people's gold in the...
Yes, but that's never happened in the UK. And of course, when owning physical gold, you can store it in a number of locations across the world.
Well, that's certainly true. Yeah. Look, I'm not trying to rain on your parade.
No.
I'm just trying to make people aware because. But also, unfortunately, if gold goes where I think it's going to go, what that will mean is that we are going to have to experience some really, really, really bad shit.
Yeah.
For gold to go to $6,300 an ounce,
that is major.
That would be a sign that that fiat currencies are collapsing right, left, and centre.
Well, fiat money is only backed by confidence, and so the minute the gold sort of, that fiat currencies collapse, that confidence is gone. Yeah. Everyone's stopped believing it. And as talking about which alternative world do you want to live in, everyone's then come over to our world, and started seeing what's really going on.
Well, I just feel more, even though we're a bunch of loonies, I do feel, sorry, speak for myself, I do feel more comfortable with the anarcho-capitalists and the Austrians and the gold bugs than I do with the people living the big lie in the other world.
No, I agree.
Because there is a total disconnect. Going back to that point I made about picking up my newspaper and seeing every day the government finding new ways to bribe the populace with money that it hasn't fucking got.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. So they're promising money that is not theirs to give. Now,
I think I read, and this is an article I wrote last week, that £15 per working person per day is created in the UK by the government. That's how much is created through money creation, credit creation, not just through quantitative easing. So that's every day when they announce these new things. I think that works out as 300 million per day.
No.
Yeah.
You see, some people ask me sometimes, why are you so angry?
Right.
And when it comes down to it, that is it. That our governments are taking us for a ride. They're in league with the bankster class, with the lawyers, with the corporations like my current bête noire, Shell.
Right.
I've got a piece in the Spectator this week where I have a go at Shell, and the reason I particularly loathe Shell is that you know how we so-called climate change deniers are supposed to be in the pay of big oil.
Yeah, I've heard this. Yeah.
I would say dream on. That I'm about as likely to get a penny from Shell to fund my climate scepticism.
You are from Greenpeace.
As I am to be made Pope.
Right. Okay.
And I'd be a good Pope, but there are certain hurdles. I'm not a Catholic.
Well, even the Vatican's got issues at the moment with their money.
Indeed, yeah, exactly. So maybe I'm not corrupt enough to be the Pope. So here we have Shell, which is theoretically an oil company, but in reality, it's a kind of it's like the kind of oil world's answer to the vampire squid. That it's very heavily involved in carbon trading, for example.
Oh, okay.
Carbon trading must be as close as business has ever got to the emperor's new clothes.
I've never quite understood carbon trading.
No, and that is designed that way.
Right. Okay. They've won.
You know who invented carbon trading?
Who?
Enron.
Oh, right. Okay.
Ken Lay of Enron invented carbon trading. Eagerly taken up by Al Gore and Goldman Sachs and Shell. Well, the carbon price is collapsing around the world.
Okay.
Because only the European Union has the appetite for this nonsensical tax, essentially, on industrial production. And if you've got clearly, if the market in thin air can only exist, and if everyone in the world agrees that thin air is a tradable commodity, the moment they stop thinking that thin air is a tradable commodity, the market collapse, which is what it's doing.
So is carbon trading a bit to do like back, a few years ago I used to buy flights and they'd say, do you want to offset your flight?
Oh, that is.
Is it linked?
Yeah, it is in a way. In that, businesses are essentially taxed on the notional carbon that they produce, and so they can buy these credits.
Yes, yeah.
Which can be bought and sold.
Which actually learning about
people.
them took up a whole module of my GCSE economics paper.
Well, there are actually people out there who are doing MSCs in environmental management and stuff. I know because I get tweets from them abusing me, and I just think, well, why don't you get a proper job that doesn't involve you
and a proper MSc,
you leeching off the taxpayer? These people are parasites, and these are exactly the kind of people who are helping create a world where we're all going to take this 30% haircut on our assets, because our money is going to these empty, pointless schemes.
Well, these bottomless empty
schemes. Look at PFI. Look at the whole wind farm industry. Look at the Quangos. Look at the money we give to third world dictators in the form of foreign aid. This is all money that's coming from somewhere, whether you like it or not. I mean, even if it's printed money by the government,
we'll pay for it one day.
That is a tax on future generations. That
Absolutely.
is a tax, and on current savers, of course, because it reduces the value of their money. So, even though I quite like the current world where we can go to Paul or Pat Val to buy a croissant and sit in the sun like we are now in my garden, and where I can go on Woman's Hour and talk about immensely trivial, pointless things like should men do more housework. Actually, it's all completely meaningless, or at least meaningless in the sense that we are now. It's probably spring 1940. We're living the phony war,
and
we're thinking
brewing.
We're thinking, well, wars. It was a shame we had to declare war on Mr. Hitler, and war is clearly, not the ideal situation, but it's manageable.
Yeah,
it's
I can
doable.
get on with this.
You can see this is how the expeditionary force, British expeditionary force, felt in those early days in northern France. They were there. They were obviously at war, and there were Germans a few miles away.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like they could enjoy the Normandy side.
Well, it was nothing like what was to come. Basically.
Well, they didn't know.
Yeah.
They didn't know. I think some people could have guessed, but most people would rather not deal with reality. They'd rather not take the pill.
No, I think you're right, but I think maybe do you think if you said to people, look, this shit's going to get a whole lot worse, but you don't actually have to, people are managing by not facing it at the moment. They think they are. So do you think they think, well, I'll enjoy now and I'll just deal with it when it comes? And I think the other thing is, because we are now living in this society where government spoon feed us cash and everything else, we think, well, until they start panicking, I'll be all right.
I think that people will do anything to avoid confronting reality. It's just the normal. You'd rather not know.
Yeah.
I think.
But I think it's also, we don't feel this responsibility to have to get on with it anymore. I think people think that the government will just tell us when we have to do it, or it's the government's responsibility to deal with it.
Oh, definitely. We've been. Well, of course, the reason that we're in this situation is precisely because of the expansion of the state over the last 50 or 60 years.
Yeah.
There's sort of there's a peace dividend of the war. In a way, this is the final disaster that World War II has inflicted on us all is the peace. The idea that in this brave new world we won't get war and suffering anymore, because from now on government will be there to make things fair and just. And of course, government is creating the situation where maybe there won't be another world war, but there will be suffering of a similar degree, I think.
Well, isn't it that we've had more wars since we left the gold standard than we've ever had?
Is that right?
Before, throughout history, and that's governments feeding it and telling you that they can look after you and look after your currency. And this was William Cobbett's argument that he was a great believer in the gold standard and a great skeptic of fiat money. Mm-hmm. And he pointed out that the moment that governments are able to print their own money, it leads to war, because suddenly they can afford wars, which otherwise they can live beyond their means. Well, that's what happened with the First World War. We came off the gold standard in order to fund it.
Yeah.
Then it screwed us in between, because no one could quite understand. It wasn't quite figured out how we got back onto the gold standard sensibly.
So, right, I'm now going to retreat into the happy world, where I can.
So, what colour pill's that you're going to take now?
Oh, I forget.
You should take the purple pill, and then we can sometimes be.
I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the purple pill. Yeah.
Well, thank you, James.
Well, thanks, Jan.